Stop Now, a social experiment enterprise.
Welcome to Stop Now. We are having a special guest for today's talk show. Our special guest, Leon Tsao. Welcome to our show.
Yeah, I do psychotherapy, and that I run those social anxiety groups that you know of. I have my YouTube channel as well.
So how did you get into this field? Like, what interests you, like, into uh, getting into psychotherapy and also mental health? Like, is there like any particular reason, or what motivated you to do this?
Yeah, well, probably people have heard about this thing called the wounded healer. So, and the idea of that is um, someone finds a vacation in healing because they themselves needed to be healed. And I felt like I had a personal experience with mental health and also a lot of compassion for others. And I feel like when I apply the psychotherapy tools on myself, I feel like they're really effective. So having that firsthand experience helps me to be able to help others.
Okay. So my understanding of what you just said is like, so you had like some personal trauma or experience in your life that forced you to go on this journey. Is that right?
Yes, exactly. So yeah, there's a past experience with it. So just to give people an idea, um, that they're about like I think it was like 6 years ago. Feel like it's like in ancient times. I did a TEDx talk, but before the TEDx talk, I always had a lot of social anxiety, a lot of fear speaking with people, and so the story goes that well, basically, for instance, back in middle school, back in high school, um, I was so nervous that and nervous around people that even if there's someone crossing down the same sidewalk as I am, I would go over to the other sidewalk because I didn't want to be in contact with them. And same thing about going to the store, like going to the cashier. I wouldn't buy anything just so that I wouldn't talk with the cashier. I feel like my inner like system could be pretty sensitive. So especially around people, when I feel nervous, I could feel like really nervous. Like there's a lot of like I'll be shaking, trembling. So yeah, just basically very. They call it like a hypersensitive system, and so that's something I have been working with through time. Just how to be able to first of all accept accept this is kind of like how my body operates, but also be able to modify it over time. And so I thought like I would be able to grow out of my social anxiety, but actually it turned out not to be the case. So so especially like in grad school, the first time I was in grad school, so I was at the University of Georgia, and I thought my social anxiety would go away, but actually it did not actually got worse. I felt like a lot more isolated because doing research, you don't actually speak with a lot of people. So, and then my symptoms became worse. And so I thought like I really had it. So anyway, one day I decided to apply to do a TEDx talk. And that's like basically I wanted to take some sort of extreme measure to be able to overcome the social anxiety. And when I applied, so I really was really down on myself for doing so because it's like, why do I want to do something that is so extreme like that, like to go on stage and to speak in front of people when I myself would have trouble speaking with even one person. So yeah, and I remember practicing, and my jaw was very like tense and tight. I experienced a lot of tension around my face, but then there was that competition phase. So there's a competition phase where they choose people to go to the TEDx talk. They choose about like half the people like they originally selected, and I actually didn't make it. So I didn't make it to the TEDx talk because I was just so like fumbling a lot on stage. But over the course of the year, I gained more social confidence, and then the next year I applied again, and I actually did the TEDx talk, and I spoke in front of 800 people. And I remember being on stage and thinking, I had that moment where it's like, wow, I'm really doing this, you know. So that's my journey, and it wasn't over then because I thought like doing public speaking would be a panacea, but because it's like, oh, that's the ultimate thing you could do if you have social anxiety, that you could, if you could speak in front of everyone, then you wouldn't have any problems anymore, because that's the ultimate fear people have. But I realized I had to learn a lot more, because my one-to-one skills weren't quite there yet, like speaking with one person. There's different skills involved. So yes, I see, like when it comes to social anxiety, there's skills involved that you could develop.
Hey,
Hey,
how we
good to
doing?
see you. Doing pretty good. Yeah,
So how have you been?
I've been well. Yeah. So yeah, heard about your show. So I see you have a really incredible mission that you have, and that you want to be able to give the world like some really beautiful messages. Yeah.
So you are basically saying that like your personal social anxiety and stigma like made you to be on this field, like to help people out on, and I'll play the devil's advocate here. I mean, I always do that in the team, and
Yeah. Okay.
Melissa will be like always nice and asking the guest like a pleasant questions. For me, like it's culturally impactful for different, with the context of what is going on with the racial things and other that is happening here in America. I'm just seeing that like it's a Western concept of the psychotherapy and other things. Like if you look at it, like on the Eastern side of the world, they don't give so much importance to the mental health. So how do you understand those things, and what is your perception on, what is your take? Since it is your profession and you are a trained psychotherapist, so.
Yeah, well, I think mental health goes deeper than the field itself. So before mental health in the West, there's mental health in the East, right? You can almost say like people, early humans, they have like some sort of concept of mental health. Like they have an idea of how to live in accordance with nature, right? So in that sense, like we became more disconnected in a number of different kinds of ways from what makes us healthy. So I mean, before mental health as a field, there was like there was meditation, right? There's a sense of social connection. So like in a tribe that you're together with other people, these things naturally provide the needs for mental health. Yeah, and also like different religions, their focus is on mental health. Like how can we be people who are happier, fulfilled, but also content? And they see that the answer lies in our focus on giving to others too. So by having that kind of focus rather than like a material mindset, we could access mental health. And yes, I guess currently it is a field that has sprung up in the West, and I think this is only like fairly recently it's been well-rounded. The reason why it's well-rounded is because there's research that's been done on like understanding of tribal people, right? Understanding of mindfulness practices, a lot of things that are not from the West. And I think that's how we're getting like we're getting healthier mentally by understanding that.
I think A question I would have is, I'm 40 years old, right? And so I would say when you're talking about how new some of these concepts are, at least in the West, up until I was probably in my 30s, particularly men did not talk about mental health, did not talk about mindfulness or meditation and things of that nature. And so I'm wondering, like, what's been the shift? Like, do you think that people are just more aware now than they were, back in the 80s or the 70s or the 60s, or is it something that just happened because it needed to happen, because people needed to find ways to express themselves, ways to heal?
Yeah, well, people are becoming more open, and they see like there's more than a select few avenues for being able to gain knowledge about the world. And because we have the internet and we have different sources of understanding, people's minds have become broader. So when their minds are broader, they understand, how like mental health is important because we have access to that kind of information. And also like how, over time, mental health has become more well-rounded. So like before, it is like pretty Western. Like there's like CBT, which there's nothing wrong with it because that's one kind of approach. But there's also approaches that are more like experiential, and there's also approaches that are more mindful, human-centered, and people who have created those approaches were very much influenced by other cultures as well, and not just the West.
Can you speak a little bit to anxiety? Because I think that's a big thing now, particularly coming off of 2020, in a year where a lot of people were more in tune with what was going on with their mental health, and maybe speak to the difference between being anxious and actually having, an anxiety disorder or panic attacks and things of that nature. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Okay, so the first question is about 2020, right? So the 2020 is a time of a lot of people are facing their mental health. So a lot of so when I look at my clients, a lot of clients start coming in specifically due to the pandemic going on, and there's a lot of issues that they haven't been facing, right, and hasn't caught up to them because they have a lot of ways to kind of keep them at bay. They're going to work physically, for instance, and they move around, and that stuff is pretty healthy, but it's also like I think because people are at home, they can't escape from their issues, and it's the time for them to contend with them. And in terms of so you mentioned about different kinds of anxiety, right? So yeah, there's different kinds of anxiety. So the thing is with anxiety, how I like to look at it is important to look at the person as an individual before the label, right? Well, the label is also important as well because it can help the person get a context of what they're struggling with, right? But I do see like even with one example of social anxiety, there's many different kinds of presentations of it, right? And yeah, and then that's the thing about this, social anxiety group is that people come in and then they have different kinds of experiences with it. Some of them may be like much more talkative than others. Others are more quiet, right? And those are actually just different expressions of it. So some people, like when they're really nervous, they just end up talking a lot. So like, I am not like exclusive. I just find tools that work and that are helpful for people, regardless of whatever they have.
Another question I would have, speaking with some of my friends is, and I don't know how it would work, but obviously you got the expertise in the field, but it seems that the older some of my friends get, the more things that 5 years ago or 10 years ago would not matter at all matter now, and they're anxious about these things, or they're more focused on these things. Can you speak to just kind of how aging and how like being at a different stage in your life can affect your mental health?
Yes, because there's definitely expectations that people have at certain ages. So like especially like when you're a teen or you're in high school, there's a tendency to be very self-conscious. Like you think that everyone is seeing everything that you're doing and they're evaluating everything that you're doing. And they're making social judgments or comparisons. And then but there's different, it's like different versions of the same thing, but according to different ages. So there's a lot of people get caught up with turning 30. So that's a big one. So people think that the 20s is like an awesome time, but actually there's people actually experience like so much pressure that time. Is like like finding a partner, right, establishing your career. There's so much that's going on during that time. So there's age, and then there's also the process of aging itself, like becoming older and developing physical signs of aging, right? So a lot of this is cultural, like how, for instance, youth is valued in a way, right? But I mean, the way I look at it is like the 20s is a tough time for the vast majority of people. So like, yeah, there's definitely things related to age and expectations, and it's really understandable. I believe that when we could look within, we could actually sense our own kind of timetable that is separate from what's given to us. That we have our own and timetable, and over time we understand it using our own intuition and accessing what that intuition is. And that can be done through a psychotherapist could help with that.
And also for me, right, back then, even now, like in Indian subcontinent, like they will say, like, if you use the word, right, mental, right, they think that as more offensive, right? It's like the person is crazy and nutcase, and they'll say they will feel like offended, like if you say that. So that and to add on to it, as you mentioned, right, before this modern psychotherapy, mental health came up, they were dependent on religions, right? Different religions had like the priest and the older people, like who were like bringing in the wisdom and giving solutions to the problems to their people. So that is how I do see it value. But in this, like the psychotherapy thing, like you can add from your experience, like how does that, is it like a medicinal thing, like you give some medicines to reduce their anxiety or depression level, or they say like a whole lot of traumas that people go through, right? Like people who are abused, child abuse, or sexually trafficked people. So how do you envision this solution for these problems?
Wow, this question is packed chock full of stuff.
Yeah, I just throw everything at you.
Wow. Okay. Let's see. So so the first part of it you mentioned about like medicine, right? Is that your question? Like, are you asking like if I give medicine or how medicine's related?
Yes.
The field. Yeah. So like right now, psychiatrists they give medication to their clients, right? So as a therapist, that's not my job. But when I say about medication, like there's a big debate about like whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, right? So in my personal experience, like that's the thing. Like I go by like the experience. I go by like talking with people, like and seeing what they need as an individual rather than like what like a group tells them. And it really is an individual by individual case basis because there are people who have benefited from medication, and the fact that medication may be over prescribed doesn't mean that some people don't need it. Right. So yeah. So um, that's what I see about medication. So you mentioned about like all these different issues about that are causing a lot of conflict in the world. So I think whether someone is the one being abused or they're the abuser, deep down they have some sort of needs, right? They have feelings and they're trying to meet some sort of need. So someone who's an abuser, for instance, it's coming from a place of desperation, right? And nothing really justifies their actions, like what their behaviors are. As a psychotherapist, what I look at is what are they needing, right? And what is their background and what led to this, and that's coming from an empathetic place, because you need to understand that. And I think when we could really understand that everyone has showed up to where they are because of something from the past that has given them that sense of desperation in a way, right? Then that's a place of healing. That's a place of healing. So like if there's a conflict like between two nations, if each side could really, really get to understand the other side, right? At an empathetic level, we could really see where they're coming from, right? And then you do the healing, and that again does not justify the actions, but if we don't do the empathy, what happens is that people shut down or they act out, and that's the cause of issues.
I want to piggyback off of something that JK just brought up here, and in terms of kind of, not only the recent violence that we've seen in America, but also just, I guess, the climate for the last few years, where people don't seem to be able to communicate with each other, and so you got a lot of tension on both sides. Like, how do we fix this? Like, is there a way that, whether it's through communication or through empathy, like you're talking about, like, how do we fix this and keep things like, whether it's political strife or whether it's, the racial strife in America, like, how can we fix it? I know that's not an easy question, but in 5 minutes, how do we fix everything?
Once I'm done speaking in a minute, all the problems are going to go away. So yeah, let's see. So with that, yeah, there's a lot of tension, and it's really difficult, and it's also it's a really frustrating. It can be a really frustrating place to be, right? And it's not easy for many people. I think like it does come down to kind of being able to look beyond the surface and be able to look at people at a much deeper level, right? At a much deeper level, at a much deeper understanding. And that, so I recall that there's this TEDx talk about like this woman who was a part of the Westboro Baptist Church, right? And then she talked about how she got out of that church. And actually, she used to be like, when she was part of the church, she posts a lot on social media, mentioning a lot of bigoted kind of things. And then people would fire back, understandably, because they want to fight for what's right, right? Yep. She said that there was a man who started to have like engage in a conversation with her. Like he wanted to understand where she was coming from, right? And then well, that's what people do. They reciprocate. So she started to try to understand him, right? And then she started to realize, wait, this is like all the things I've been learning is nonsense. Like the Westboro Baptist Church is basically run by like a family, right? And it's kind of, there's a lot of brainwashing going on. And she learned, and that's how she was able to quit. There's also another one about like this man who was part of the Ku Klux Klan and became like a high level position, like one, I'm a wizard, right? Something like that. And then he he had like political influence, and then I forgot like the details of the story, but like they got him to work with a black man or as a black woman, right? And then on some sort of project together, and it's like and it was through that experience that he was transformed, that he realized there's much more than the eye could see. Like there's a lot more, like it's I think it's through that experience with others, like you said, how come we're not like connected, right? Is that because we're forming assumptions based on ideas that we're given, but we're not having these real like experiences with other people. And then I think that makes a difference.
Or how much of that plays into the idea of social media, where if you are somebody who has bigoted ideas or has, racist ideas or homophobic ideas, you can find a group that will accept you and, reinforce your thoughts. Like how harmful, as great as social media, as great as technology has been, like how harmful do you think it's been in terms of people's mental health?
Yeah, that's it. It is harmful, and it's almost like a craving in a way. So like if we're getting some really awesome like cheeseburgers, we want to eat more cheeseburgers, right? So it's the same thing here. It's like you get addicted to the echo chamber. So people get into their own echo chamber, and the echo chamber just goes just goes on, and you're not like able to see beyond it because you're locked into a certain perspective. And it's hard to see another perspective because we're seeing people through an abstraction. So there's this thing by, I think the guy's called Martin Buber, and he says, can we change our relationships from I-it relationships to I-thou relationships? So basically like we're talking about is like when people are talking on social media, they're talking about the others like they're it, right? They're that it thing out there. Like, and when people are viewed as it, they're viewed as a stereotype. They're viewed as something to be used, right? So, what overcomes that is that sense of empathy. So, and that's something that can be trained because there's ways to be able to demonstrate empathy. Like if you could really step into another's shoes and really care to look at, like actually be curious, like what are their feelings and what are their needs, right? And I think a great way to start, like what I do is I give people something called nonviolent communication. And what that is that people tell their story and you identify what their feeling is, like what are they feeling? And then when they're feeling this way, what are they needing? So if they're feeling scared, right? If they're feeling scared, what are they needing? They may need to, for instance, that things are more efficient, or they may need that things are, that there's a better sense of connection. And you find that all these human needs are universal, right? But how we're trying to meet the needs is not universal. We have very different opinions about that. But it's good to try to empathize first, because then that opens the door, because then you could turn it so that okay, so I talked about your feelings and needs. So what do you think is the other person's feelings and needs? Like, so you're having this conflict with this person, what are your feelings and needs? And when you try to deny that, then people fight harder to defend their position. But when you could validate that, then they're more open to saying, okay, well, this is what that person's feeling and this is what they're needing. And you find that people around the world, they need similar kinds of things. They need a sense of connection. They need a sense of things that are effective. They need a sense of safety. And then regardless, that's why people might join groups like these social media groups, is that they have a sense, they want to have that sense of connection somehow, right? Or they want that sense of safety. So being able to understand where it's coming from without justifying the action, right? Then you could actually find a different way to be able to meet that need for them, or they can meet their own needs differently.
And then those groups, when you were saying that, it just kind of clicked in my head that, I feel like a lot of people tie their identity and who they are into, groups like that. And without the group, who am I? And maybe that's a question that more people need to kind of ask themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. You are bringing up a deeper conversation. We would love to continue this in the next week. We will continue the discussion, because I'm quite excited to ask more questions. Because the thing comes to my mind looking at you. Maybe your clients might have said, right? Or you are doing a group therapy. How does that group therapy works? Have you had any difference in experience? And also looking at you, you are looking like a young kid for me. I mean, like late 20s, if I'm not wrong. And what about older guys?
You do look very young.
45 or something, right? How do they trust you? Like say, oh, my therapy is a young boy. Like, whoa, what am I doing with him, right? Have you felt that?
Oh, yeah. So just like what you say, like, when people first meet me, they meet like an image, right? So like they see me and they may say, well, my idea of a psychotherapist is not like some young looking Asian guy, right? It's usually some sort of like middle-aged white lady.
Yeah.
That's your image of, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, but I feel like, once the conversation gets started, it's different. So they did a research study that and initially, like when people choose their psychotherapist, they're gonna choose, like they're gonna look at, oh, I wonder how this person's like picture looks like, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and then, but then like once you start working with a psychotherapist, all that kind of like dissipates, because like you form like a connection with them. And then especially if they're good psychotherapists, then they get at the heart of the matter, right? And it just starts to not matter who they are. So the research is like, based on like ethnic matching, right? So if people would choose people, with similar ethnicity, but then like whether a person stays in therapy or not, that the ethnicity doesn't matter so much. It's actually so long as it's really based on the psychotherapist's personality.
Thank you so much, Leon.
Yeah, you're welcome. Good to see you both.
Yes, thank you so much.
Bye.
Stop Now, a social experiment enterprise. Stop, listen, share. Everyone can make a difference. We are on a mission. Everyone should do something greater in their lifetime. Change the future. Be a proud member. Join us to support, volunteer, and donate.